No, it's so cool. Hey, it gets you going. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Unlocked Show. I am Tracy Mustain, coming at you live today from a completely different location. So I'm doing a little bit of a road trip with my husband, and we are on our way to Townsville in far north Queensland, and we've got a bit of a stopover here for the next few days in Airlie Beach. So for those of you, I thought I would sit out on the balcony to give you this amazing view because I absolutely love waking up to this morning, but you guys can now see it. This is the gateway to the Whitsundays and to the Great Barrier Reef. So for those of you who are dialing in from all over the world today, this is a beautiful, idyllic place, part of the world that you really should, when we're out of this COVID situation, you should come and visit and make your way up to Port Douglas and Cairns. And if you can, come see me on the Gold Coast, which is a little bit further south. But anyway, this morning we've got the wonderful Lindsay Mustain back with me. Lindsay was with us last week. We had an awesome show talking about, HR and, how to really get, Scott Stevens is saying he's just jealous just a little bit of where we're coming from today. Yeah. So we were talking with Lindsay last week, and I've asked her to come back again because one of the things that she is very passionate about is Black Lives Matter. And I'm going to say that this is, I'm going to just put it out there, two white faces on the screen right now going to be talking about a subject that, you might think, well, why the heck are you two talking about it? And Tracy, you're not even in America. You're in Australia, and originally I'm from New Zealand. So, what business have you got speaking about this particular topic? What I'm going to say to you is that I've been lucky enough to travel back and forth to America over the last few years, and I have made some wonderful friends over there of all different colours, races, sizes, etc. And this particular topic just pains me to watch a lot of them have to go through this on a daily basis. Now, I'm lucky enough that I come from New Zealand, who has had what we call the Treaty of Waitangi, which was signed back in 1840, which has done, and we've done a lot of work in New Zealand in terms of society and just being a really proud New Zealand Māori, and never really grew up feeling like you were marginalised. And I hope that nobody else in New Zealand feels that way, because we're just kind of all one, and Māori is part of our everyday society. We are no different. And the same here in Australia to a degree. I'm just going to lay this up, Lindsay, so that people understand kind of where I fit in and how this all, how this has all come about, and why I feel that it's so important for us to talk about this. But then moving from New Zealand to Australia was a really interesting, transition for me. And in fact, at the time I was working for a large banking corporation, and they asked me to come over to Australia and to get up one of their branches and to get it on the right track. And that happened to be in a little remote town called Kingaroy, which was our first introduction to Australia, living here, and it was amazing. We made some fantastic friends there, but I won't, it also, when I came over and went to the interview there, and I went to visit the town, it was just me, and I had my mum and my aunt with me, who are both, dark Māori skinned. And I can remember us sitting in the RSL, which is the Return Services League, which is like if you go there and have a meal, in this particular small town when we first moved there. And I can remember sitting there and looking around the room, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I could move here. I don't know if I could bring my dark-skinned husband and children to this town, because as I was looking around, I saw no dark faces. Every face that I saw, I felt like I could almost be in China. I felt so far out of my normal comfort zone with the skin and the faces that I saw, that I almost said no to that job, and I'm so pleased that I didn't. Luckily enough, here in Australia, they're making a lot of headway into reconciliation, and they have something called the Reconciliation Action Plan here in Australia. Still a fair way to go, but it's definitely on the national radar and on the national scheme, and people are, businesses are doing a lot about that. So that's my kind of history, that's my knowledge of, where things are at in New Zealand and in Australia. And there'll be a lot of people from Australia and New Zealand watching this conversation today. I want us to think about this from a point of view of, we may be sitting in another country right now, like I'm sitting right now in Australia, and I'm going to have a conversation about something that's going on not even in my own country. Okay, so specifically we're talking about Black Lives Matter in America, and we might think that that is only in America, but it is not. And what we're going to be talking about today, I want you to look at it from the point of view of how can I be part of the solution? How can I help make a change so that we have equality and inclusion for all, no matter where you live in the world, because you do not know whether the next generation in your family is going to be living in one of these other countries that has this marginalization and a lot of racism and so on and so forth going on. So I want to encourage us to look at it from that point of view. Even if you are not in America right now, you think this is not for me, doesn't impact me, I want you to stay around and think about how you can, like I said, be part of the solution. So after that very long-winded introduction from me, I want to welcome the wonderful Lindsay Mustain to the show today. I value her opinion a lot, and I know that she is a very integral, she comes from a place of integrity and is always looking at how she can be part of the solution. So welcome to the show, Lindsay. Great to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. And such a wonderful introduction. And I see people in the chat are saying, like, Donald, looking forward to hearing it. And who else did we all fit in? Scott did. And the answer is true, because I think if we kind of look at a macro level, we're no longer just individual nations. We are an entire human. And we're all inextricably linked together. And what causes a benefit for many causes a benefit for all. And we seem to get really caught up in, like, this is mine, this is me, this is my sphere. If it bothers this, then I'm worried about it. But if it doesn't, then I kind of just duck out. And I think it's actually been what's caused. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about, like, America's history, because in this, it's important to know that we're fighting a fight that really happened 70 years ago. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's let me try this again. Civil rights movement. We used to do things where we would say separate but equal. That was the first kind of transition for us to say, okay, we're going to give you the same opportunities, but they're going to be separate. And yet we still, like, because of the color of your skin, we'd separate them out. There would be white schools and black schools, which is still true today, because there's primarily black neighborhoods and primarily white neighborhoods. And we have not grown up integrating together, that we are all one part of one, like, we are the United States of America, right? Like, we got here by being all together. We got here by being different. We decided to take off and be rebels and to find a place where you could be freedom, or have freedom from religious persecution. So now it's been 300 or so years later that we've been here, and we're still fighting some of the very basic things that happen. So when I talk about Black Lives Matter, I'm not really going to talk to you about the part where we take, because what happened was the inciting moment that really broke everything was truly when George Floyd died on camera with social media with 4 police officers around. He died in Minneapolis, and there had been multiple things that had happened up until that point, like 3 different other instances, and then that one. And then that one was what caught. And that was the part that sparked the awareness of a pandemic that we hadn't been fighting, which was the racial pandemic. Okay. So racism is alive and well. And I'm going to go out here and say every single one of us suffers from racism. It's true. There's actually, you can go in and do a self-study assessment from Harvard and see what your bias is. So I know that I have a bias against it. The difference is not that you have a bias. It's that what do you do to correct it and even it in all things? So it's important to understand that bias is natural. We're never going to be able to get bias out of here, because we are all tribal. What that means is that in order to have survived for millennia, we surrounded ourselves with people who acted and thought like us. That was our tribe. And then anybody who is outside that tribe is considered an outsider. So you can see why we have these very strange political leanings where they're so one way or so in the other. And then there's a lot of us that are just floating around here in the middle and like, well, like, I'd like you to take care of my money. And I also think we should be giving people freedom. So in that same sense, we have we've created this great divide. And I personally believe that it was at one point, let me try to say this. How can we, this more liberal leaning people got, we had Obama, and Obama was a huge win for us. That was a major thing. And so everything has been this, what we call like change back behavior, which is we want to switch everything back to where it was before that, and even back in the good old days. And so it's that time where this is a lot of it. So I don't want to talk necessarily about that part, because I think the question you should ask yourself is, if you look at any Black person and you say, especially me, somebody who's completely white, 97% European DNA, would I change places with a Black person? Would I give over my problems, and knowing that if you think they're totally fair and equal, would you trade places in a minute? Because that answer should be unequivocally yes, no problem. I guarantee you nobody says, you know what, I definitely want to move into the projects. I definitely want to be fighting the preschool to prison kind of system that we've created. Nobody says that. And that's how you know when there is incredible privilege and that we know it's not right, and yet we do nothing about it. And so this inaction is what has kind of ignited, because we watched someone die in front of our eyes. We watched him die a cruel life where he cried out for his mother. And I think about my children, and that it just kills me. And so then there's people who are like, oh, it's totally fake. And I'm like, okay, no, like we're prosecuting these people, and not all cops are bad. Like but what we have is a situation where if you get pulled over as a Black person for speeding, I never worry if I'm going to die. They do. And that is a huge, huge difference. And it's something that I have white privilege running through my veins. I have it. And I've always felt like, for me, it was really important to be inclusive. But I realized that I sat too long on the sidelines and tried to make movements, tried to get people to go along. But I never really got loud and said, you know what, this is acceptable and this isn't. And that was my part of where, like, I need to be bought into this conversation. So you don't get to avoid the conversation. I kind of, this is how I'm going to compare it. And it may seem incredibly gruesome, but at this point, we are talking about the complete persecution and separation from an entire group based on something they believe in should be the color of your skin. The only time I can go back and really say that we know that was when we talked about the Nazis in Germany and the Jewish people. This is kind of like the equivalent of the modern day, the modern day segregation of that, and where we get to choose what side are we on. So like, how people in Germany, they want to show all of the progress that they've made since then, because it has a really deep and hateful background. And that's so hard, it's so hard for us, but they know that they have strived to do better, right? Like, you wouldn't even think that's not even that long ago compared to, like, that amount of time was only about 30 years before the civil rights movements. So we've been fighting the same battle for about 100 years of times where we have completely separated certain groups from society and said that they are good or they are bad. Now, here's what most people believe, is that everybody has a fair shot. This is America. This is what we were born to do, right? Land of the free. And you're right, except the free part belongs to the white man. And I say that as a woman who has been repressed. I say that as a sexual assault victim. I say that as somebody who has been inside of community or in organizations that reflect, and all the people on the board look exactly like each other. They're older white men who've gotten there. There's maybe a token female. And she probably heads HR. And then that's it. And that's what they call diversity. In fact, I've heard a time where a panel was, the board said, oh, we're very diverse, even though they looked all the same, because we all went to different Ivy League schools. So just to be clear, that's homogenization, that's whitewashing, and that's saying we're doing our effort. And so now we're trying to deal with the inflammation of an issue that no longer we can't ignore it anymore. We can't ignore it. So and so for me, this is where I say, I am here talking to you because I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough. And that was my privilege. And so now my choice was, I get to pick which side of the road I want to be on, what side of the history I would like to DEI. And so now I'm making it right. Yes. So Robin's saying it's definitely the normal. I'm going to tell you, like, it's pretty big. When we talk about it, there's less than 3% of any senior executive on a board of a company. Less than 3% of them are African American if they're Black people. Okay. So we don't recognize this or their contribution. Okay. So what comes in to creating this whole situation, and I'm going to turn this around and that say, we should have free opportunity. We've built the process, have free opportunity. The truth is we've never really given it to them. We've said, hey, everything's equal. We created what we call affirmative action hiring, which means that you do hire people of diverse colors. And I've been inside of organizations that employ hundreds of thousands of people, Fortune 25 companies. And I'm going to tell you, when I look at their report, the truth is we don't do what's right. We don't do what's right. We may make a good effort, and hopefully you have somebody who is like, for me, I'm actually going out there and trying to put forth the effort to create inclusion. The one measure you can check to see if you're being inclusionary is take a look at your local community. And so take a look at this. So if you were because I'm in Seattle, if you were in Seattle market, 15% of your workforce should be Black. Like that's how you measure. You should just try to achieve equal or better, a mimicking of your workforce inside of your company. And in fact, I propose that even looking at two candidates who are completely equal in every way, that we see somebody who is a marginalized voice, which could be a voice of color. It could be a young woman. It could be a mother who's on her own, all these things that typically or maybe even an older man. These are marginalized voices that we should consider that a benefit. And that's hard for some people to understand and say, like, oh, it should be equal. Well, I'm saying if it's all equal, then we should consider that a benefit because they bring something unique to the table, which is a perspective and a life that we have never lived. So are you okay if I keep going for a little bit here on this? Okay. So I have been in talent acquisition and hiring inside the HR field for 18 years now in my life. So I have been the bridge that helps people come on board inside of a company and helps to actually decide who gets to move up and who doesn't. So I have watched this over and over and over again, where a company says, oh, like we're going to do what I call check the box activities so that we don't get in trouble. But it is a heartless measure, meaning it's something where we go CYA. Hopefully you guys know what that means. Cover your behind and not get sued. That's really the goal of us. It's not actually to go and try to recruit. And there's a couple of different governing bodies that look over this part inside of major hiring for large companies, which is called the Equal Opportunity Commission. The EEOC is what that's called. And then we have a secondary one, which is called the Office of Federal Contractor Compliance. So it's the OFCCP. And believe it or not, the OFCCP is the more stringent of the two. So if you abide by OFCCP, you got EEOC involved. And so what that means is we can definitely tell when we look at the numbers at the end of the day, what have we been fair and what have we been inequitable about? And that's where we go into something called the 4/5 law. And that means that we can look at something that is getting where we actually can look at a division of the population. So for those of you that are familiar with hiring in America, they make you fill out a form, and a lot of people are terrified to fill this form out, but it's important for you to. And it's called the EEO1 form. And it tells you, like, here's my ethnicity. Am I a veteran? Do I have disabilities? That's typically the things that are included on that form. And the reason is that and your gender, to determine, have I had intentional bias against a certain population? And so those things have become where it's so lightly regulated, meaning there's a couple of investigators, and then they'll pull names and they'll do something called like a quick audit, like it's a desk audit, and then you'll submit your stuff. And most of the time we can get past that. In fact, if you have strong litigation, that is going, or a strong litigation team, you're not going to end up having to go any further. Well, I had a really bad one. So I ended up going back and being a part of a community that went back for, it was close to 4 years. They looked at of data. And by the end of it, they said, and this is where I'm going to be inclined to disagree for some of this, because they said, we had one question, which was, tell me the difference between a cable modem and a dial-up modem. Now, this was a technical support role, so really important for you to know those differences. But that one question said, it immediately, if you didn't know what it was, that would be something that women would normally have, and then men typically knew where it was. And that meant that in our customer support, that women mostly went to one thing and didn't go to the other. And it's something where I disagree that they should have needed to know that question. However, I agree that we should have done something to make the playing field equal, meaning an opportunity to do research and to give them the advantages that they didn't have up until this point. And it came back with about a $3.5 million settlement and have to rehire, I think it was close to 18,000 people, or pay them for it. Now, they, of course, this is where negotiations happen. I think they ended up just having to do a settlement for a couple of $1 million. So I'm just going to say, like, this is going to come back to bite you in a financial way. Even if you don't want it to, you're going to be found out. So instead of just looking at this as the right thing to do, which it is the right thing to do, I think we all know in our hearts that we should be fair. And if I'm going to go back to what a lot of the people who are very Republican, very staunch on that, is that we are all God's children, which means that we should get everybody a fair shot. Nobody gets an added advantage. And that means that instead of thinking about just what Black Lives Matter, I want you to think about, what do we do to change that in our lives today? The things that we feel in touch. Like, we're not going to be able to change police enforcement. We're not going to be able to change that. We're not going to necessarily change how the funding is happening. That's not what we can do. But as entrepreneurs, we can do a lot of things that helps even the playing field, because we've said it's been equal. And you're right, we kind of made it flat, but we gave them a 200-yard disadvantage. They got to start so far behind, they never even had a shot. And people have been just checking this box for inclusionary efforts for so long. So what is the real enemy here? And it's alive and well, and it's alive and well even in my company. And I'm going to tell you that I think it works out for me in a certain way because I've set it up. And it's something called groupthink. Have you heard that, Tracy?
No. Tell us more. Groupthink.
Okay, so what groupthink does is when a group of people who share similar beliefs, they typically look the same as well, they create their own homogenous thoughts. They believe that because they have all of these voices who have rallied together, that they are therefore right. They are, because they can make better decisions than the whole, because they have this. But the antithesis of having groupthink is having somebody who comes into that and disrupts that thought. So groupthink is actually the evil here. So groupthink is causing people to make assumptions about large bodies of people or decisions that now they all think the same, and therefore they do. And if you guys can watch this in every corporate board in America, they don't see, like, I'm going to give you an example, those very large consulting company, and they're doing very well right now. However, they've taken the opportunity in this time to let go of 5% of their workforce and give them less than cost of living increases as a promotion. Not even just like there's no increases annually, but just as a promotion that's even less than the cost of living. So they're adding for more work where you actually get less money out of your pocket. And it's things like that it's really sickening. And they're like, well, we can do that because, you know, in their mind, they're like, we're trying to compete in a different environment. This is the right thing to do. This is how we save the business, when nothing really actually changed for them on their bottom line. And so, yeah, mass agreement is, Robin's right. The mass agreement is so difficult because we tend to go along because we don't even want to speak out because everybody else is in agreement. How many times have you been in that room? I don't want to speak out because everybody else is going along. I don't want to be the person who's like, well, have we thought about this? Because guess what? You're like the little fly in the room and you get smacked.
Yeah, absolutely. You become the minority that doesn't want to speak up because you're going to be slammed.
So instead of a single voice being powerful, this combined voice becomes more powerful than the ideas of full-on movements or communities. And that's actually what we're fighting against right now. It's not necessarily, when I say like, when Black Lives Matter completely as like, we need to fix, we have some very the way we treat people inside of our prison system and our what we consider like that judicial system, it's really unfair. There's a reason why a black man will walk into court and come with a serious bias or a serious penalty, or a white man or a white woman can come in and they'll get a slap on the wrist. So we know for sure that happens. So that combined voice becomes more powerful than being able to hear what's actually happening. And so a lot of times what it looks like for people, they're out there going, la, 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 like it was all good in the 50s. And I was like, yeah, you mean when everybody was oppressed and the white guy had all the privilege? It still is today. And this is where usually I get the comeback where I'm like, well, I'm not actually the minority, or I'm going to be a minority. And I said, good, then maybe you'll have an understanding of what it's like. Because right now you are not. You are in the positions of power. You are not the minority, even if as a certain number. So which is saying that we still elevate this one type of person who looks and sounds the same all the way to the top. Yeah, it is dishonorable.
And, back to your point of that whole groupthink mentality, I mean, even that is becoming more prevalent now, particularly with the likes of social media, because the way in which, like, you think about how you think the people you surround yourself with, and you think that you've got access to things like the internet to do your own research. But even now, the internet and the search engines will serve you up things that are in alignment with the way in which you already think. So if you're trying to get a different view, often you'll really struggle to do that, because it will continue to serve up the things that you already believe in, and therefore perpetuate the problem and that level of thinking. So you're not getting, so that really does contribute to that homogenized thinking and process.
That is exactly, I mean, our social media feeds completely are customized. Like they will help you film your opinion and isolate that opinion to say where it is versus changing. And I'm going to tell you, like, I am one of those people who I grew up in the Midwest, so I was more Republican by nature, just by my upbringing. And as I've gotten wiser and how I feel like I'm a bigger part of society, I am more liberal in that I think that, well, I'm just going to lay it out there. I think there are so many different resources on the planet, and such a small minority hold them, that's why children are starving. And that's why everyone doesn't have access to free water. And that's why people dive without any dignity, because we have such an inequity of wealth. Now, I'm not going to say I don't believe that you should be able to make your own mark. No, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a capitalist by and far. I'm a capitalist. But you can be a capitalist and still be equitable. And that's where you have to kind of learn to walk that. But this group thinking dynamic, it's not just isolated inside of corporate America. I'm going to give you some examples from history where groupthink has caused major disasters, like the Bay of Pigs, or Cuban Missile Crisis, etc. The Pearl Harbor attacks. They didn't think that Japan could make it to us. So we didn't plan for shelter. That was not something that was even touchable. Okay. The Vietnam War. Yeah, we got our butts served in that, and then came home and we had a whole generation where we realized, like, we're not in it for war, like choose make love, not war, right? Like that was the whole backlash to that. And then the most recent one was the space shuttle disaster, Challenger. When that exploded and killed everyone on board, we found out it had to do with like nuts and bolts. And because they didn't want to say anything, it killed everybody on board. And that is how powerful groupthink is, and why you need somebody who breaks it, okay? So what does groupthink look like when it's uncomfortable? Which is when you have something that brings in. So, right, I said 3.2% of executive jobs are held by Black professionals, and then less than 1% of Fortune 500 people have an African-American CEO. In comparison, the entire population of our country, 14% of them are Black. So we created a homogenous leadership group that creates conformity and is the antithesis of an enemy of change, okay? We've deafened their voices.
Yeah, and I'm going to say to that, Lindsay, because of, the things that I believe in around, equality for women, that there are very few, like those numbers that you just rattled off, like you're talking about, minorities being included in those numbers, very few of them would be women. Yes. At level 2.
Yeah, I don't even think that there's probably a statistic on female Black women that are leading organizations. So yeah, we're talking about one thing in particular here, but Robin says it's pervasive anywhere you have crowds. And yes, this is where you see like And what happens when people when they get unheard, oppressed, or they start to see people where they actually, and they start to fight for them. And it creates this incredible stirring of emotions because we've recognized that, wow, we are not right. We watched, instead of, and I'm going to say this is exactly what happened to me. Instead of me being in my world thinking, okay, life is good. Like I am so fortunate and everything is going pretty well. And then I'm watching somebody get murdered on screen. And I'm going to tell you, this is incredibly, this is a huge paradigm shift for me because I'm going to tell you why. 1, my brother was murdered last year. 2, both of my in-laws are police officers. 3, I'm an HR person. So I've been watching the numbers and statistics, and I understand the reality of what it means for people in their daily lives, what that really means. And so all of these things said, I don't get to not choose a side. I don't get to, and if you don't deliberately choose which side, which is inclusion, or that you continue to like this process where we go and we just check a box. Okay, guess what? I sent this out to my local NAACP program, and now we've done it. We have to make sure, the statistics of my family, I can't, exactly. This is where I said, this is where I have to call my shot. And I'm going to tell you what my mom said. My mom said to me, Lindsay, don't say anything because you're going to immediately eliminate half of my customers. And what did I say? I went back and I was like, okay, like I heard you, hung the phone. First thing I did, I went on Facebook and I said, if you were thinking about working with me and you don't think that Black Lives Matter, we wouldn't have been a good fit anyhow. And that was me calling my shot where I said, I'm not, because they aren't for sure. Like I work exclusively with marginalized voices. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, I like to think of the best way I can describe this. And it's been described in multiple ways, but it's like babies in a NICU. Okay. All the babies are in the NICU because they all need to be taken care of. They all have something that's very dangerous for them. But when one baby is coding, that baby is going to be resuscitated. They're going to have that crash cart. We're going to make sure that they get back so that they can continue to live. This is the part that we seem to be missing, is that all of us are doing just fine. We are doing just fine. We may still need we have some scrapes and bruises, but none of us are crashing so hard as the Black population in America, and I would dare say even in the world. They need the resuscitation factor. They need the ones who need help to get back up on their feet. And that's where it's like, instead of when you come, people go, all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. I'm like, okay, so we're saying that means we're not going to resuscitate this group because just in case all of the other babies might crash too. And that is where that makes no sense. I think we can all agree that that makes no sense. And if we make it as so simple that say, okay, we are going to revive the ones, that's where Black Lives Matter comes in. Okay. Now here's how we can change it. We can't change the judicial process. We can't change the enforcement of our laws, but what we can do is we can make a decision as entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to tell you about, instead of checking the box, how do you actually move the dial and how do you become a good member of society? And I mean that as an inclusive member who, even if you don't, I'm going to be honest, like it's only 15% Black people. It's less here. It's like, I want to say 12%. So, but I'm going to say my hairdresser is a Black man. I'm going to get my hair cut later today. I was like, the designer on my team is a Black woman. My way is I hire in particular for talent. And that doesn't, that does not a discussion about the color of your skin. Now, I never thought a man in particular could be able to cut my hair. He's amazing. Thank God I have him. Shout out to Kentron, my hair guy. So, I'm also going to tell you that it's not just good to do, it's in your best interest, okay? Diversity brings a ton of added advantages into an organization. Okay, so here's what statistics and science has told us, is that diverse organizations see better profitability, increased problem solving, and outperform other companies that do not invest in diversity. So for all the whiteboards out there, all those people that are completely made up of white dudes, we're coming for you. We're coming for you, okay? And here's how true this is. It's scientifically proven that companies who actively hire and promote diversity create better business results to the tune of increasing your bottom line revenue by 19%. Okay, I'm going to repeat that for those in the back. By investing and promoting diversity, besides checking the box, true diversity, you could increase your bottom line performance revenue by 19%. Okay. So can you imagine a 20% growth in the middle of a recession? Okay. There's a reason why companies are doing that. And the one thing that is big is that we're finally listening and bringing in voices and hearing things that make us feel uncomfortable. So let me be also really clear. There are times where I think, as the leader of my organization, I am right. I am right. In fact, I work for a company that one of their mantras said, "Are right," a lot, meaning I was right the majority of the time. And the problem is that when you become so like, I am so right all the time, which I typically am, and I'm going to say that, and it's the part that is actually my downfall, is that we need to realize that so are many of the people on our team. One of my biggest things I've learned in working with my coaches, Alex Sharfin, is that I have a whole team that is way more talented than I ever thought they were. And they only got the chance to shine when I let them, instead of me thinking I'm the best at this, or I'm good. Like, there was one time where they wrote an email. It was the best email we've ever sent out. The most results. I didn't have it was my thoughts, but they organized them. They wrote it. They didn't sit, like, they chose the title, and it performed better than everything else. And that was my way of going, oh, okay. I don't think I can do it better now. I need it. I need to let go of that, because especially as entrepreneurs, we feel like a lot of control. If we hold on to things tightly, like somehow it'll be better. No, we are actually disempowering. So that's one thing, is instead of like directing everyone on your team, is to invite inclusion. No matter what they look like or sound like, everybody has a different story. Even if they look the same, everybody has a different thought process, a different life they came under, a different experience where they can bring you a different perspective. Instead of squashing that, to invite that as to part of the conversation. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, there's something that's happening right now that's inside of organizations, and it's truly causing, we're watching the fittest of the survival of the fittest right now, especially in companies. What's making somebody who is in the same business on the same block, one's surviving and one isn't? And what is it? It's the ability to pivot, to create incredible problem solving, and to meet their customer where they are at today. Now, this is where companies are really struggling to survive, because they've done it the same old for all time. Then it's a hard process. Like, one of my favorite stores is Nordstrom's. Nordstrom's is like tanking. I was like, but my very favorite store already had an incredible online shopping experience. And so they have been backed up for months. Like, you're going to get because they've had such incredible growth. What makes those two different? One, they diversified their offering. They pushed really hardly in having not just an in-store experience, but on having an online experience. Okay. So how can we start to embrace diversity? That's the real question I want to talk about. So the one thing is, we have to stop hearing with our heads and start hearing with our hearts. And I'm going to tell you, I did a podcast last week, and I talked in particular about the ability to tune in to our own intuition. And I know this is going to sound a little woo-woo, but how many of you have trusted your intuition against everything else and have done something, and it's actually been the most remarkable thing that you can do? Okay. One of the things that I have found is that when I started saying, here's my intuition, here's what I'm feeling, let me paint the picture of what I'm seeing, and I invite my team to come in and say, well, this is a good idea or a bad idea, because I need to hear that too. And what's that? We come out with a solution. This is, it's not compromise. It's what we call like synergistic, which is Stephen Covey, like we came this third alternative that's even better than what we individually had come together. That's what happens when groupthink gets dismantled. And instead we start to look at what are we being pulled to? What are our greater knowing? What is it possible that we can see and we can hear in a way that is not about fear, but is it about how do we move forward? Okay. And so the other part of that is that allowing other people at the table to have a voice, even when, that we think we know better. And I'm going to say I'm the first person. So I'm over here. Typically also what we coach is what we can learn ourselves. So when I'm saying this to you, I am practicing what I preach inside of my company. It's something that I'm working on. So when we say, okay, we want to do this, and then instead of saying, okay, how do we do it? We say, what are your thoughts about how this is going to work out well or may not work out? What am I seeing? What am I not seeing? And then you bring them into the conversation. Instead of them being scared to speak up, we invite them to bring a dynamic that goes against what we already believe. And this is where discomfort happens, and why groupthink is so easy, because it's just easy to go along. But when we bring in that idea, and sometimes it's like, can think of a couple of times where I'm like, this is such a good idea. And they're like, but what about this part? Had you considered that? And I go, you're so right. We got to take care of this part before we can even come close to doing that. So we have to be willing to listen. And that's the thing, is that I am a steamroller. Like, I have such a force of energy and I have so many ideas, which is what entrepreneurs typically have, that I may completely silence my team around me because they're like very excited about where we're going. But if I had just bothered to say, so what do you think? We would have annihilated obstacles that I didn't even know we were going to come up against. And so one of the is letting everyone have a voice. Okay. So it's a secret superpower, is giving the idea for diversity for everyone. And I'm going to say that if you do this right, it doesn't just meet for Black lives, it meets for all people of marginalized voices, which is what I realized in my company. I didn't know this until we pointed it out. When we look back at all of our success stories, I realized we had created avatars and not one of them was a white guy in his 30s. That wasn't it, because that was never, and one started to look like me. Others were high-powered executives. A Black man and a Black woman are actually on that list. And I thought, you know what? They're the same avatar. The only difference is that they are Black. And I thought maybe it isn't fair to separate them out because I'm choosing them based on race. And I'm like, I absolutely need to, because it's just like women who have, like, they might have all the right things, but they don't have the right parts. They don't have the right parts, and therefore are muffled and smothered. And so we do have to help these people and to realize that they're going to face barriers. I see as an outsider who measured diversity, but it didn't impact me, and nobody else sees it to that degree. Okay. So that's where we have to really do it. So how I'm going to tell you now, there's 6 ways you can do group or try to create diversity, inclusion, eliminate groupthink. And the first one is to lean in. Okay. And when I say lean in, I mean, we stop checking the box so we feel better about what we've done, that we've completed compliance, and that we really gave them a fair shot, but we didn't. Okay. We're talking about strategies, rewards to incentivize your team to hire, train, and promote marginalized voices. Okay. We need to lean in. Okay. So we need to incentivize it and reward it. If we do that, that's why I tell you, this is actually a good financial decision. Do you know why I tell people that is the driving force behind this? Because I want the people who are to focus on the bottom line to realize it's not just a good thing to do as a member of humanity. It is the right thing to do because it'll help your business. Okay. So I hope that 1 is that you want to do the right thing, and 2, that you're willing to put the time and effort to it, because it actually creates a financial reward. Okay. The second thing is that you need to mirror your community. So commit to mirroring your community, which means that, you have a group of all stay-at-home moms, which is what mine used to be. And now I have a couple of men on my team, and I have different areas. I have different things, and I've created an incredibly different, because we have different countries, different nationalities, different color in our skin, different color in our experience. And so we want to measure where we're at as a community at large and say, do we fit that worldview? And I can say for sure with my team, it is now. Now, once upon a time, it was people who looked just like me, meaning there were white women with kids. And this is also not a bad thing, because guess what? Some of the most marginalized voices are white women with kids at home. That's not a bad choice. But what I'm saying now is that we've been able to expand that vision, and that's actually helped me go further. Okay. And so measure, analyze, and report on this every quarter. That's the way you can do that. Okay. Now, here's the other part, tapping into your people's potential. Poll your people. Okay. Do a quick pulse survey and do it in a way where people can be anonymous. Ask your existing employees, contractors, consultants to share their ideas on how you can improve diversity. Okay. Inside of your organization, provide a safe place. That's why I say give them a place to do this anonymously and be heard. And especially listen to voices that you've never heard before, because you finally gave them a chance to have a chance to say something. Okay. Then what you should do is consider creating an advisory board. Okay. Or maybe a single lead topic. And for bigger companies, I would recommend an advisory board to help lead company initiatives, somebody who's truly bought into it, somebody who's willing to be the uncomfortable voice that's willing to say the things that don't go along with it and allow them the space and freedom to do so and do not penalize them for that. So when we say, hey, we want to be diverse. So if, for example, we created a scholarship program right now, and that was meant to help people who could not afford our services otherwise. That was something I wanted to do. We need to have somebody who's going to lead that and say, how do we make sure we include more people? That's going to be important. Okay. And then create fair hiring practices. Okay. So I'm not talking about settling for checking the box. I'm talking about creating volunteer time, creating financial resources to your local NAACP or BLM chapters, whatever voice resonates. And there might be even something, a smaller micro community that might be all about Black women or any kind of marginalized voice. And then ensure that people can get referred and get interviewed. So when we say, we send out like, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the right part of sending these job postings out to them, make sure that they actually get a chance, even the ones that don't appear perfect on paper. Now, I'm going to tell you as a recruiter, nobody on paper is as good as if they're as good on paper, they're not the same in person. If they're terrible on paper, they might be fucking amazing. And I say that because I'm always looking for the diamond. The diamond doesn't always have the best resume. Okay. So give a better shot to people rather than classifying them. Okay. And then how you can do this is creating active outreach. And giving people who inside your communities in your community or your company added advantages to even their own playing field. Okay. So if you're seeing like Black professionals inside of your company are not getting the same opportunities as their white counterparts, then that's something you should do. Okay. And I again go back to that. When all things are weighted equally, we should look as diversity, as marginalized voices, as the single way to choose the right person, because they are going to bring more to the table than somebody who looks and sounds and thinks like we do. They will bring something that's uncomfortable to the table. And we have to recognize that that discomfort gets us out of groupthink, lets us hear things that we've never heard, and lets us perpetuate more advancement inside of our company. We're striving for inclusion, not assimilation. Always inclusion and not assimilation. And then the other last thing you should do is that this has to be from the very top. Sponsorship means it needs to come from the leader of your organization saying, these are the things we believe in. These are part of our tenets. And we want to give a platform to share the promotion and achievement of marginalized voices. Okay. So give them a platform to share their success with their peers and their leadership team. Love this. Robin's all on it. Okay. What about age diversity? Okay. So this is where you have to be. So when you talk about like, what is safe, or what do we, this is where, okay, let me just tell you what I'm thinking. The first thing comes to mind is like, how do we make sure we're not unfair to any population? Okay. How do we make sure we're not unfair? Meaning, how do we create balance in this? And so I'm going to say that the right age for hiring, I'm going to tell you statistically what it looks like, is a white man who's 35 years of age. That's pretty much that kind of with a cushion of 10 years before and after. That's the guy who's going to have it pretty easy. Yeah, and yes, he is a minority. However, yes, he is ruling everything in the world. Okay. So there is added advantage of having people who are less experienced. There's an added advantage of bringing people who we, and a word that I truly hate, which is overqualified. Okay. So these assumptions, we have to check what our gut belief is. And I talk a lot about being overqualified, because most of us, the people who are these high performance people, they've been really successful in their life. They may have had a ton of success, but what they're looking for is not necessarily to perpetuate that success, but to make a difference. So when somebody comes to you, don't completely bias them like, this person is already doing this and they're not going to be able to be afforded by us. I want you to question what you already assume about them. That's the power here, is to ask that. And then when you have somebody who's really inexperienced, hello, that was me for most of my career. And yet I did a really good job. And I brought something that was fresh, and I drove things that didn't happen before. So you want to make sure that you give those people a fair shot too. Okay. Yeah, the overqualified one is the most difficult, but also brushing people aside because they're young is a big no-no too. So I always say that there's two things I'm really looking for. It's not experience. It's going to be enthusiasm and the vision of what they can bring. So enthusiasm meaning if they are more excited than somebody who is perfectly qualified for this job, but has zero inclination of being interested in it, I'm going to choose enthusiasm every time. Okay. So those are my six ways that you can increase diversity. I'm sorry I went on a complete soapbox here with you, Tracy. But I wanted to share like what's happening here, what's happening today, and how does it impact us at the level where we run businesses? How do we make sure that we continue to be fair and equitable? And how do we give us our best chance to survive in today's world, which is to take away the groupthink dynamic and ask people critically how that we can do better at what we do.
Absolutely. And I have, you know, today I wanted to be really quiet, and given that I've got a lot of wind going on, it kind of made a lot of sense for me just to allow you to speak, Lindsay, and allow you to get on your soapbox, because that is what, you know, I'm all about people taking a stand, people talking about the things that they are passionate about. And you spoke beautifully about it, the things that you are, you know, that you are doing right now to help marginalized voices, to speak about these things so that we can all understand it and we can all do something about it, be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And if we can all do that, then little by little, we as entrepreneurs, because we make up the biggest, you know, the biggest part of society. There are hundreds of that, millions of us in the world who are entrepreneurs who can make a difference. You know, one person at a time, one piece of thinking at a time, and it all starts with us at the top of at the top of your own organizations, and making sure that you lean in, that you do the things that Lindsay's, you know, that we encourage the things that Lindsay's talking about. We're allowing people to speak. We also make sure that we're not only listening, but we're allowing people to be heard. You're actually really not just ticking a box, like you say, and saying, I'm listening to what you're saying, but I'm going to twist that and make it come out and only go with what I think. Anyway, I've listened to what you're saying, but I'm still going to go with what I think. It's listening, it's hearing, taking that on board, and making sure that you take their views into consideration and allow that to happen. And also, like you said, sometimes when we're, you know, you're in the entrepreneur, you know, mode, you're at the top of your organization. Really, really easy for us to become passionate about things and become bulldozers and railroad people into thinking the way that we do. But really important that we don't do that, that we allow people to speak, we allow them to be heard, and we allow these changes to be made, because the reality is this world is getting smaller. You know, the things that are coming out, this technology, you know, 20, 30 years ago, there was no way in the world that you and I would have been on a call, me in Australia, you in America, in Seattle, having a conversation about Black Lives Matter in America. It just wouldn't have happened. So today, the world is changing. It is changing at pace. And like I said, you can either be part of the solution or you can continue to be part of the problem. And you know, even going against what your mum said, you know, Lindsay, you should be quiet about this and you shouldn't speak about it. Even this show is like, should you do a you know, should you actually have a topic like this on your show? My answer was, hell yes. Why not? Why would I not want to bring light to this? Why would I not want to speak about this? Because it's an important piece of humanity, and it is about us being part of the movement to make this change occur, to help give people the hand up that they need in their time of need.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about it. So I do say this again, as a person who is not of color, but as somebody who has watched the interactions of tens of thousands of people who are marginalized voices. And I know how we think, and I know we can do better. And the biggest part, I talked a lot about heart and intuition. And I'm going to say that's not something that happens most corporate America. Most businesses are not focused on the heart. And I think it's actually one of the biggest things that we overlook. And so whenever it comes down to it, you can look at what am I doing in this world, and is it aligned with who I am as a person, inside of my heart, inside of what I feel is right. And that's the voice to listen to. And it may not be the popular opinion. And you have to be willing to have a group around you who's also going to support you in not having a popular opinion, knowing that it was the right thing and not the easy thing.
Absolutely. And being able to go to bed and sleep straight at night. You know, if you can do that, and I always think about that, you know, if I done something good today, have I done the right thing? Did I listen to my intuition? Can I sleep well at night? If I can walk away from, you know, go to bed at night with that and feel good about what I've done in the world, then, you know, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to wrap us up now, Lindsay, but I want to say thank you so much. I have had the privilege of having you on the show for 2 weeks straight now. And, you know, I mean, you and I could talk for hours and hours. Like after the last week's show, we actually stayed on for at least another half an hour and had a good old chin wag and just tried to catch up. I don't get to see her as often as I would like to. But, you know, like Lindsay said, there's been some challenges that she's been through over the last couple of years. I've watched her resilience, her leadership, and just her. She is an amazing person. You want to make sure that you continue to follow her where you can. And I hope to have her back on the show. Probably sometime next year we'll have her back and we'll talk about some other topics and allowing you to really make a change in the world by adopting some of the things that Lindsay's talking about. So thank you so much for being here. Guys, today is, you know, been a topic that is super important, and I want you to take it really, really seriously. So for those of you who have stayed around, that have been watching all of this time, thank you so much. I applaud you for, you know, for taking this time and really wanting to listen and really wanting to make a change and make a difference. Secondly, for those of you that are listening on the podcast or listening after the fact, you can come and join in the conversation after the shows. Like always, you can find us on Facebook. Success Secrets for Business, Family and Life is where we stream. I stream twice a week on a Wednesday and on a Friday, which is Australian Brisbane time. And I'll be back again this Friday with another episode of The Unlocked Show. This show is all about helping people to live their life unlocked, helping you to thrive across your business, your family, and your life, because no one thing, just like what we've talked about with this topic today, no one thing is in isolation. We want to make sure that we embrace and we encompass all of that and bring all of you to everything that you do. So, you know, as you know, I sign off every single, you know, week with, you just need to go away and live your life unlocked, because once you continue to watch this show, you will realize that there is just no other way. Do not give yourself an option. Do not keep yourself locked up. Live your life unlocked and do the things that you want to do, because life is short and you want to make sure that you get the most out of it and do the things that mean a lot to you in this lifetime. So thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again. My name's Tracy Wilson. It's always my pleasure to have you guys here. Back again this Friday, and I'll probably be coming to you again from this beautiful location here in the Whitsundays of Australia. All right, guys, have a great weekend, or great week, I should say. Bye.